It started with a phone call I almost didn't pick up. A simple ring. An unfamiliar number flashing on the screen, while I was deep in the chaos of preparing for another Monday at work. My mind immediately went to the usual suspects: scam calls, telemarketers, or, if I was unlucky, an angry client who found my personal number. I considered ignoring it. But something in the back of my mind nagged me to answer. "Hello." My voice came out cautiously. There was a pause on the other end before a voice I hadn't heard in years came through. "MIA." My hand tightened around the phone. That voice, it was older, wearier, but unmistakably my father's. I hadn't heard from him in a decade. Yet his words hit me like a punch to the gut, dredging up memories I had buried deep, hoping they'd never resurface. The last time I saw him, he was standing in the doorway, suitcase in hand, his face twisted in a strange blend of guilt and excitement. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 16. Still just a kid, trying to make sense of the mess my life had become. My mom was upstairs in their bedroom, crying into a pillow, her sobs muffled but still cutting through the walls like a knife. She had just found out he wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The affair, the lies, the nights he claimed he was working late, it had all come to a head that evening. And instead of staying, instead of fixing what he had shattered, he packed his bags with no shame, no hesitation. I stood there in the hall, watching him, my heart pounding in my chest, the reality of it all crashing down on me. "Are you really leaving us?" I had asked, my voice small, like I was afraid of the answer I already knew. He didn't even look at me when he spoke. His focus was on zipping up his suitcase, the clink of the zipper louder than anything else in the room. "It's better this way. MIA. You'll understand one day." His tone was dismissive, like I was too young, too naive to grasp what was happening. Like this was all some grown-up decision that didn't concern me. But it did concern me. It concerned me in every way possible. How could he not see that? I watched him as he grabbed his coat and car keys, like he was just heading out for a normal day at the office. My eyes burned with tears, my throat tightening as I fought to stay composed. I didn't want to cry in front of him. I didn't want him to see how much it hurt me, how deep the betrayal cut. I wanted him to know how angry I was, how much I hated him in that moment for choosing her, Marissa, over us. "She's not your family," I had yelled, my voice shaking with emotion I could no longer control. "We are." That's when he finally looked at me. For the briefest second, I thought I saw a flicker of something in his eyes: regret, guilt, maybe even love. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold, detached stare I had come to recognize over the past few months. "I'm sorry. MIA. But it's done." His voice was flat, emotionless, like we were discussing something trivial, not the destruction of our family. And just like that, he walked out the door. He left me standing there in the doorway, my world falling apart around me. He didn't even look back. Not once. I remember crumbling to the floor, my knees giving way as the weight of it all crashed over me. The tears came then, in thick, uncontrollable waves. My chest heaved with sobs as I realized he wasn't coming back. He was gone. Just like that. He chose her. He chose his new life, his new family, over us, over me. And now, after a decade of silence, he had the nerve to call me, to ask for forgiveness. My hand trembled as I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. MIA. It's your dad. Please. Don't hang up. My silence must have made him nervous, because his voice grew quicker, more desperate. I know you don't want to talk to me. But I need to explain. Explain what? My voice was colder than I intended. But I didn't care. The floodgates of old emotions burst open the second I heard his voice. Abandonment. Resentment. Anger, it all bubbled to the surface in an instant. You already made your choice. Dad. You chose your new family. You threw me and Mom away like we were nothing. There was another pause on his end. And for a moment, I thought he had hung up. But then, quietly, he spoke again. I never stopped thinking about you. I scoffed. Could have fooled me. I was ready to hang up. Every fiber of my being screamed that I didn't owe him anything, especially not my time. But something, maybe curiosity, or some leftover vestige of love I'd buried deep down, kept me on the line for just a little longer. My health's not good. MIA. His words hung heavy in the air between us. I've been sick for a while. The doctors, well, they're not optimistic. I just wanted to try and make things right before you die. That's what he was saying. He wanted to make amends now that his time was running out. But where was he when my time, my teenage years, were slipping away from me while I had to grow up too fast? Where was he when Mom was struggling to pay the bills, because he had emptied out their joint account to start his new life with Marissa and her kids? Where was he when I needed a father? You want to make things right, I repeated, my voice shaking now, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Dad. The time for that was years ago. When I begged you to stay. When I called you for weeks, trying to get you to answer. When you stopped paying for anything, because you were too busy taking care of someone else's kids. That's when you should have made things right. He was silent again. And for a moment, I felt the satisfaction of knowing he had no defense. But then his voice broke through. Small and fragile. Not the voice of the man I once knew. I know I've hurt you. MIA. I know I can't undo the past. I don't want to die without you knowing I'm sorry. The word sorry felt like a slap. I had waited years for an apology that never came. And now, when it was too late, here it was. I didn't know what to do with it. Sorry wasn't enough to fix the broken pieces of my life he had left behind. Sorry wasn't enough to heal the wounds that never fully closed. I don't know if I can forgive you, I whispered, more to myself than to him. I understand, he replied quietly. I just wanted you to know. There was another pause before he added. Marissa's gone. Left a few years ago. It's just me now. Something shifted inside me. I had always imagined my father living his new life in bliss. His perfect little family. The replacement daughter and son that had taken my place. But now, hearing that it had all fallen apart, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Instead, I felt empty. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, though my words felt hollow. He sighed. And it was the sound of a man who had lived with regret for far too long. I don't deserve your sympathy. MIA. I know that. But if there's any chance, I'd like to see you. Before it's too late. I swallowed hard. The thought of seeing him again, after all this time, was overwhelming. I didn't know if I could do it. But then again, I didn't know if I could live with the regret of not going. I'll think about it, I managed to say. "Thank you," he breathed. As if that small concession was more than he had hoped for. "I'm staying in the old house, you know where to find me." After I hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. My mind spinning with emotions I thought I had long since buried. The truth was, I had thrown my father away, just like he had thrown me away. I had cut him out of my life. Erased him from my thoughts. Convinced myself that I didn't need him. But now, hearing his voice, hearing his remorse, I wasn't so sure anymore. I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying that conversation in my head, trying to decide what to do. My best friend, Sarah, noticed something was off when I cancelled our usual Friday night plans. But I couldn't bring myself to tell her what was going on. I didn't want to admit that I was even considering seeing him again. On Saturday morning, I found myself standing outside the old house, the one where I had grown up. The paint was peeling. The lawn was overgrown. And the mailbox was hanging on by a single rusty nail. It looked as tired and broken as I felt. I almost turned around. I almost walked away and left him behind again. But something in me, maybe that small part of me that still longed for a father, pushed me forward. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. And after what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open. There he was, standing in the doorway, looking smaller, frailer than I had ever seen him. His once strong frame was hunched, his hair thin and grey. He looked like a man who had aged more in the past 10 years than he had in the 20 before that. "MIA," he said, his voice soft, as if he couldn't quite believe I was there. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him, taking in the man who had once been my hero, the man who had broken my heart. The man who now stood before me, broken himself. Finally, I spoke. "I came to see you. But I'm not here to forgive you. Not yet." He nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "I don't expect you to." I stepped inside, and we sat together in the living room, the silence between us heavy with everything we hadn't said over the years. I didn't know if I would ever truly forgive him, or if I even wanted to. But sitting there, in the house where we had once been a family, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to throw him away completely. Maybe it was enough to simply be here, in this moment, trying to piece together the fragments of what was left. Because sometimes, that's all you can do.